Okay, so in this chapter, we are going to discuss criminal law. Um, and so I like to target or create my courses as it relates to the relevancy. So if it feels like in this unit we spend a lot more time on chapter 5, which is civil law, than we do on 6, which is criminal law, that's by design because there is criminal liability in business. We'll talk about that. But there's far more civil liability. So when we're talking about a crime, we're really talking about a harm against society. You know, you go and steal something, you break uh, a law, right? The key difference between civil law and criminal law is the burden of proof. So in criminal law, you have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard, effectively 99.9%, right? And so when you see um, individuals getting off on the news or on social media for crimes that it appears that they did, that's the reason why. Because proof beyond a reasonable doubt just means that the state or the county failed to meet that burden. Whereas civil, we're going to use preponderance of the evidence. So in any tort or negligence case, you really just have to show that it's more likely than not that the allegation is true, right? Which is much easier to do, all right? And the reason being, more is at stake in criminal cases. Typically in tort cases, all that's at stake is money, where in criminal cases, you can be talking about sanctions. If it's an individual, you can be talking about fines, imprisonment, um, and a rap sheet. Some actions can be both a tort and a crime. We talked about assault and battery. Those fit the bill. Um, most criminal acts are made up of, or I should say, criminal liability is composed of two parts: the criminal act. If you're looking for some more Latin, we have that. The actus reus, which is the guilty act, the violation of the statute. All right. And in the guilty mind, which is the mens rea, the guilty mind. All right. And they both must occur at the same time for criminal liability. All right. And the guilty mind can be established with actual intent. I intended to batter someone, or I intended to, um, shoot someone, whatever the crime may be. Or recklessness, I knew that there was a risk, and I chose to do it anyway. All right. So either one of those, actual intent, recklessness, knowledge of the potential outcome, can establish the mens rea. All right. And they both have to happen at the same time. All right. Strict liability crimes don't require the guilty mind. The classic is speeding. Right? If you're speeding in your car, obviously nobody would ever pay a speeding ticket if you say, "Well, I didn't mean to speed. I was just driving along and got, a little bit too much pressure on the accelerator." Strict liability. So if you statutory rape is, having sex with a person below the age of consent. Doesn't matter if you knew the age of the person or not. That's a strict liability crime. All right. But for most crimes, you need the guilty act, the actus reus, and the guilty mind, which is the mens rea. corporate criminal liability. So corporations are legal people. We'll learn that in the next unit. And they can be found guilty of crimes. All right. Corporations can't be sent to jail. All right. But they can be fined. They can lose licenses. They can lose profits. Things of that nature. All right. Corporations are held liable for the crimes committed within the scope of employment. In other words, if I am advancing the interest of the company, then that company can be held liable. Don't get it twisted, however. Corporate officers are always personally liable for their own crimes. And that goes for torts as well. So the mere fact that two parties can be held liable doesn't preclude, or I should say the fact that a corporation can be held liable doesn't prevent an individual from also being held liable for their actions. General rule is that parties are always liable for their own crimes and always liable for their own torts. There are levels of crimes. Petty offenses are usually just you pay a fine and move on. This is like a parking ticket. Misdemeanors, which means you can go to jail for up to a year. Felonies can be punished by more than a year in jail. Violent crime. So violent crimes are separated because they're subject to a different statute of limitations. But violent crimes include murder, rape, assault, and battery. And we separate those from property crimes. Larceny, which is theft and carrying away of personal property with the intent to permanently deprive, i.e. stealing something. All right. Receipt of stolen goods can also be larceny. So if I receive goods, somebody gives me goods or even sells me goods that I know is stolen, that's receipt of receiving stolen goods. And it's a type of larceny, so you can be held liable even if you're receiving goods that you know are stolen. Arson, burning something for malicious intent. A lot of times this is associated with insurance fraud. It makes for good TV, but it happens from time to time in real life. And forgery. Submitting a writing, changing a writing for one's benefit. Public order crimes, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. Public intoxication, gambling, drug usage. Not a lot of exposure there for business, but white collar crime. All right. These are crimes committed typically through one's employment. Generally, they involve taking assets entrusted to one, including embezzlement, mail fraud, bribery, theft of trade secrets, or insider trading. All right, and of course, we know insider trading is what Martha Stewart was charged with